Have you ever wanted someone so badly that it consumed your every thought? Have you laid awake at night wondering why she doesn't feel the same way about you? I know that feeling. I've been there, staring at my phone, hoping for a message that never comes. But today, I'm going to share something powerful with you, something that changed everything for me and can do the same for you. The secret isn't about tricks or manipulation. It's about becoming the kind of man that naturally draws women to you, even those who initially showed no interest. Before I reveal these principles, let me be clear. This isn't about playing games or being someone you're not. This is about authentic transformation that makes you genuinely magnetic. You see, when I was younger, I made every mistake possible with women. I came on too strong. I was too available. I put them on pedestals. And the results? Rejection after rejection. But through those painful experiences, I discovered universal truths about human psychology and attraction that few men ever understand. What I'm about to share with you today isn't just theory. I've tested these principles in my own life and witnessed countless men transform their relationships using these exact methods. These aren't quick fixes. They're fundamental shifts in how you show up in the world. And when you implement them correctly, something magical happens. Women who once barely noticed you will find themselves thinking about you constantly, wondering why they can't get you out of their minds. The most powerful force in attraction isn't looks or money, it's psychological impact. When you understand how to create emotional imprints in a woman's mind, you'll never again struggle with making her miss you. She'll be drawn to you automatically, like a moth to flame. This process begins with a simple truth. People value what they earn, not what's freely given. When everything comes easily, we take it for granted. This is human nature, and it applies to relationships just as much as anything else. Remember this. Attention is the most valuable currency in today's world. Everyone is fighting for it. Social media companies, advertisers, friends, family, they all want a piece of our limited attention. So when you freely give all your attention to a woman who hasn't earned it, you're essentially telling her that your attention has no value. And what do we do with things that have no value? We discard them without a second thought. I made this mistake countless times. I would meet a woman I was interested in and immediately make myself completely available. I would text her constantly, agree to meet whenever she wanted, and basically revolve my entire schedule around her convenience. I thought I was being nice, being a gentleman, but in reality, I was communicating that I had nothing else of value in my life. No purpose, no mission, no standards of my own. And women would sense this neediness instantly, often before I'd even realized what I was doing. The first principle I want to share with you is what I call purpose-centered living. You must have a compelling direction in life that exists completely independent of any woman. When your sense of fulfillment comes primarily from your purpose, women can sense it. They can tell that while you enjoy their company, you don't need their validation to feel complete. This creates a natural, authentic form of attraction that can't be faked. Let me explain how this works on a psychological level. When a woman sees that you have passionate interests, goals you're actively pursuing, and a life that's already full and meaningful, it creates curiosity. She begins to wonder what drives you, what makes you different from the other men who immediately make her the center of their universe. This curiosity is the first seed of attraction, the beginning of her thinking about you when you're not around. I remember when I finally understood this principle. I had been pursuing my passion for humanitarian work, spending weekends volunteering at a local shelter. I wasn't doing it to impress anyone. I genuinely cared about making a difference. One day, a woman I had briefly met weeks earlier reached out to me. She said something that stopped me in my tracks. I can't stop thinking about how passionate you were when you talked about your volunteer work. It's so rare to meet someone who cares that deeply about something. That was my first glimpse of how powerful purpose-centered living can be. I wasn't trying to make her miss me. I was simply living authentically, pursuing what mattered to me. And that authenticity created an emotional imprint that kept me in her thoughts. This brings us to our second principle, selective availability. When you're building a life of purpose, your time naturally becomes more valuable. You begin to understand that every hour spent is an investment, and you become more intentional about where you direct that investment. Most men make the mistake of being too available too soon. They clear their schedules at the first hint of female interest, essentially communicating, "I had nothing important going on anyway." But women are naturally attracted to men whose time is valuable, men who have clear boundaries around their availability. This doesn't mean playing games or deliberately ignoring her. It means having a genuine respect for your time and priorities. In practice, this might look like declining a last-minute invitation because you've already committed to something important, even if that something is personal development time you've set aside for yourself. It might mean taking longer to respond to messages because you're fully engaged in your work or passion projects. When done authentically, this selective availability creates intrigue rather than distance. I'll never forget when I was developing a community project that required intensive focus. A woman I was interested in suggested a spontaneous day trip. In the past, I would have dropped everything immediately. Instead, I told her truthfully, "That sounds wonderful, but I've committed to finishing this project today. Would you be open to planning something for next weekend instead?" Her response was telling. "I respect that you take your commitment seriously. It's actually really attractive." This leads us to our third principle, creating meaningful experiences rather than constant connection. Quality always trumps quantity when it comes to building attraction. Many men believe that constant communication is the key to staying on a woman's mind, but the opposite is often true. When every interaction with you is deep, engaging, and emotionally resonant, you create powerful memory anchors that she'll return to again and again. Think about it this way. Which would have more impact, texting her good morning every day for a week, or taking her on one unforgettable adventure that pushes her outside her comfort zone? The human brain is wired to remember peak emotional experiences, both positive and negative. When you create these peak experiences with a woman, you're essentially programming her mind to replay those moments during quiet moments of reflection. I once took someone hiking to a remote waterfall. The journey was challenging. We got lost, had to cross a stream, and arrived just as the sun was setting. The combination of natural beauty, physical challenge, and shared triumph created such a powerful experience that months later she told me, "I think about that waterfall whenever I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed. It's my mental happy place." I had unintentionally created a memory anchor so strong that it became part of her internal emotional landscape. This brings us to another crucial understanding, the power of unresolved experiences. Our brains are naturally drawn to complete unfinished stories. This is called the Zeigarnik effect, the psychological tendency to remember interrupted or incomplete tasks better than completed ones. You can ethically leverage this principle by creating interactions that leave her wanting more, not by deliberately withholding, but by naturally allowing anticipation to build. In practice, this might mean ending a date at its emotional peak rather than letting it drag on until the energy fades. It might mean maintaining an element of mystery about certain aspects of your life, revealing yourself gradually rather than all at once. When there's still more to discover about you, her mind will naturally return to the puzzle, working to fill in the blanks. I learned this lesson when I was sharing stories from my life with someone I was dating. I mentioned an experience that had profoundly changed my perspective, but before I could elaborate, we were interrupted. Later that week, she texted me, specifically to ask about that story, saying she couldn't stop wondering what happened. The unresolved narrative had stayed with her, bringing her thoughts back to me repeatedly. Now, let's address something important: emotional security. Making a woman miss you isn't about creating insecurity or playing with her emotions. Quite the opposite. Women are most drawn to men who make them feel both excited and safe. This paradoxical combination, the thrill of pursuing something challenging, yet the security of knowing it's solid ground, creates the strongest attraction. This brings us to our fourth principle, consistent unpredictability. At first glance, these words seem contradictory. How can you be both consistent and unpredictable? The answer lies in understanding which aspects of your behavior should remain rock solid and which should vary to create interest and anticipation. Your values, integrity, and emotional stability should be absolutely consistent. When a woman knows she can count on your word, that you'll do what you say, and that your character doesn't waver under pressure, this creates the foundation of safety that allows attraction to flourish. But within that framework of reliability, introducing unpredictable elements creates the emotional variation that keeps her engaged and thinking about you. For example, your responses to challenging situations should be consistently measured and mature. But the types of dates you plan, the conversations you initiate, or the thoughtful ways you express appreciation can be delightfully unpredictable. One week you might send a handwritten note referencing something meaningful from your last conversation. The next you might surprise her with tickets to an event related to an interest she mentioned. I remember applying this principle with someone I was seeing who had mentioned her love of obscure foreign films. Instead of the predictable response, "We should watch one sometime," I researched a limited run screening at an independent theater and invited her to join me. The combination of having listened attentively to her interests and taking unpredictable initiative created a powerful impression. Months later, she admitted that moment was when she realized I was different from other men she'd dated. This leads perfectly into our fifth principle, reflective listening and delayed action. Most men listen to respond, not to understand. When a woman shares something with you, whether it's a problem, preference, or passing comment, your instinct might be to immediately act on that information. But there's tremendous power in simply absorbing what she shares, reflecting on it deeply, and taking thoughtful action at an unexpected moment in the future. When you reference something she mentioned weeks ago, it communicates several powerful messages simultaneously. You listen carefully, you find her thoughts worthy of remembrance, and you're thoughtful enough to connect past conversations to present actions. Few things make a stronger impression on a woman's mind than realizing you are paying attention when others would have forgotten. I once dated someone who casually mentioned missing the peach trees from her childhood home. 3 weeks later, when visiting a farmer's market, I spotted some locally grown peaches and brought them to our next date. The look of astonishment on her face when she realized I had remembered that detail was unforgettable. "I can't believe you remembered that," she said. "No one ever remembers the little things I say." That small gesture created more emotional impact than an expensive gift ever could have. This brings us to an essential truth. Emotional impact is created through contrast. Just as we only notice the stars because of the darkness between them, the emotional highs in your interactions have the most power when they're set against periods of absence. This is not about manipulative hot and cold behavior. It's about the natural rhythm of connection and independence that exists in healthy relationships. Consider this. When you're constantly present, constantly available, constantly affectionate, it becomes the expected baseline. There's no contrast to create emotional spikes. But when your presence in her life follows a more natural rhythm, periods of deep connection followed by periods where you're focused on your purpose, each reconnection creates a heightened emotional response. I experienced this when I had to travel for 2 weeks for a professional commitment. Before leaving, I had a meaningful dinner with someone I was seeing, giving her my full presence and attention. During my trip, my communication was necessarily limited by time zones and responsibilities. Upon returning, the joy of reconnection was palpable. "I didn't realize how much I would miss our conversations until they weren't happening every day," she told me. The temporary absence had created the contrast that highlighted the value of our connection. Now let's talk about something that few men understand, the power of genuine non-neediness. This is perhaps the most attractive quality you can develop, and it can't be faked. True non-neediness comes from having a solid sense of self-worth that doesn't depend on external validation, especially not from women. When you truly know your value, you don't need constant reassurance through texts, compliments, or expressions of interest. This inner security is magnetic because it's so rare. In a world where most men are seeking validation from women, whether obviously or subtly, a man who already feels complete within himself stands out dramatically. This doesn't mean being aloof or uncaring. You can be warm, attentive, and emotionally available while still maintaining your center of gravity within yourself rather than seeking it from her. I remember the shift in how women responded to me when I finally internalized this principle. After years of personal development work, I reached a point where my sense of self-worth was no longer tied to whether a particular woman was interested in me. Paradoxically, this is when women became most interested. They could sense that while I enjoyed their company, I didn't need their approval to feel good about myself. This created a freedom in my interactions that was palpable, a lightness that made being around me a pleasure rather than a pressure. This brings us to our sixth principle, becoming a source of positive emotion rather than seeking it. Most men approach women with an underlying agenda to get something from them, whether it's attention, affection, or validation. Even when this agenda isn't conscious, women can sense it. It creates a subtle energy of taking rather than giving, which naturally creates resistance. When you shift to becoming a genuine source of positive emotion, someone who brings joy, fascination, comfort, or excitement into her life without expecting immediate reciprocation, everything changes. Your presence becomes associated with positive feelings rather than subtle pressure. This association is what makes her miss you when you're not around. She's actually missing how she feels when she's with you. I saw this principle at work when I consciously focused on bringing positive energy to my interactions, regardless of outcome. Instead of meeting a woman with the underlying question, will she like me, I approached with the intention, how can I add value to her day? The shift was remarkable. Conversations flowed more naturally, connections developed more easily, and women began to proactively seek out my company. One particularly memorable example was when I met someone at a social gathering who seemed withdrawn and uncomfortable. Instead of seeing this as rejection or disinterest, I simply focused on helping her feel more at ease in the environment. By the end of the evening, she was visibly more relaxed and enjoying herself. Weeks later, she reached out to thank me for making her feel comfortable that night, saying she'd been going through a difficult time and my approach had been a bright spot during a dark period. That authentic connection, built on giving rather than taking, created a lasting impression. This leads us to an important understanding. Making a woman miss you isn't about employing tactics. It's about embodying qualities that naturally draw her toward you. When you become truly comfortable with yourself, clear about your boundaries, passionate about your purpose, and genuinely interested in adding value to others' lives, you become someone worth missing. These qualities can't be faked. They must be cultivated through genuine personal growth. Let's talk about another powerful principle, embodying gentle masculinity. In today's world, many men have lost touch with healthy masculine energy. They either suppress it entirely, trying to be what they think women want, or they express it in domineering, aggressive ways that create distance rather than attraction. But women are naturally drawn to men who embody balanced masculine energy, directive but not controlling, strong but not harsh, confident but not arrogant. This gentle strength creates a magnetic pull. Because it's so rare, it allows a woman to feel both protected and respected, guided and heard. It's the quality that lets her relax into her feminine energy, knowing she's with someone who can hold space for her emotions without being overwhelmed by them. When you embody this balanced masculinity, your absence creates a noticeable void. There simply aren't many men who make her feel that particular combination of safety and excitement. I remember when I first began to understand this principle, I was having dinner with someone when she received distressing news on her phone. In the past, I might have either awkwardly changed the subject, suppressing masculinity, or immediately jumped into aggressively fixing her problem, overcompensating masculinity. Instead, I simply moved my chair beside her, put my arm around her shoulders, and said, "I'm here. Take whatever time you need, and then we can talk about it if you want to." The look of relief on her face told me everything I needed to know about the power of gentle strength. This brings us to our seventh principle, creating space for her to invest in you. Attraction isn't just about what you do, it's about what you allow her to do for you. When a woman invests her time, energy, attention, or resources in you, she unconsciously assigns you greater value. This isn't manipulation, it's a fundamental aspect of human psychology. We value what we invest in. Many men make the mistake of trying to do everything for a woman they're interested in, planning every date, making every decision, never asking for help or allowing her to contribute. While this may seem generous, it actually prevents her from experiencing the satisfaction of investing in the connection. Without investment, there's little emotional stake in your absence or presence. But the key is creating natural opportunities for her to contribute in ways that align with her gifts and desires. This might mean accepting her offer to cook a meal, asking for her insight on a decision, or allowing her to plan an activity she's passionate about. When she's invested effort in your connection, your absence creates a much stronger emotional response. She misses not just you, but the role she plays in your shared dynamic. I experienced this shift when I began allowing women to contribute to our connections rather than trying to impress them with constant giving. One particularly memorable example was when someone offered to help me prepare for an important presentation. My instinct was to decline, not wanting to burden her. Instead, I accepted gratefully. The 2 hours we spent refining my talking points created more connection than our previous 3 dates combined. Later, she told me she'd been thinking about our work session all week, feeling pride in how well the presentation had gone. Now, let's address a common misconception. Making a woman miss you isn't about being unavailable. It's about being selectively available for the right reasons. When you're absent because you're genuinely engaged in meaningful pursuits, your purpose, growth, responsibilities, or essential self-care, it communicates value and integrity. When you're absent to create artificial scarcity or to play games, it communicates manipulation and insecurity. Women have finely tuned intuition for distinguishing between these two types of absence. The former creates respect and attraction, the latter creates distrust and distance. This is why authenticity is absolutely essential to everything I'm sharing with you today. These principles only work when they're expressions of genuine growth rather than calculated tactics. I learned this distinction through painful experience. Early in my journey, I would sometimes manufacture reasons to be unavailable, thinking I was creating attraction. Women would see through this immediately and rightfully lose respect for me. It was only when I developed a genuinely full life with real commitments, passions, and boundaries that my periodic absence began to create the emotional response of being missed rather than being dismissed. This brings us to an essential understanding. The foundation of being missed is being valued in the first place. You must create genuine value in her experience before absence can create longing. This value comes from the unique combination of traits, energy, perspective, and presence that only you can bring. When you consistently show up as your best self, growing, learning, and sharing your authentic gifts, your presence becomes something worth missing. Think about the people you miss most when they're not around. It's not usually those who are the most physically attractive or financially successful. It's those who bring something unique to your life, understanding, inspiration, comfort, joy, or growth. When you consciously develop your ability to bring these qualities into a woman's experience, your absence creates a specific void that can't be filled by someone else. I remember when I received a message from someone I'd been dating who had been traveling for work. "I've been surrounded by people all week," she wrote, "but I still feel lonely. No one sees me the way you do." That message revealed the specific value I had been creating in her life, the experience of being truly seen and understood. This is the kind of specific value that creates genuine longing in your absence. Let's talk about another powerful principle, the contrast between challenge and acceptance. Human beings are naturally drawn to what challenges us, yet we also crave acceptance for who we truly are. Most men offer only one side of this equation, either challenging a woman without accepting her or accepting her without ever challenging her. But the most magnetic men offer both, creating a powerful psychological pull. Challenging doesn't mean criticizing or being difficult. It means holding her to high standards, believing in her capacity for growth, and occasionally pushing her outside her comfort zone. Acceptance means embracing her authentic self, including her flaws and vulnerabilities, without trying to change her essential nature. When you embody both qualities simultaneously, you create a unique experience that she'll find nowhere else. I saw this principle at work when I was dating someone who was extraordinarily talented but paralyzed by self-doubt. I would both affirm her abilities unconditionally and gently challenge her to take risks in pursuing her passion. "I completely believe in your vision," I told her, "which is exactly why I don't accept your excuses for not sharing it with the world." Months later, after we'd moved to different cities, she told me, "I miss having someone who believes in me enough to call me out when I'm playing small." This brings us to our eighth principle, creating forward momentum. Humans are naturally drawn to what's evolving rather than what's static. When your connection with a woman has a sense of movement and growth, deepening conversations, new shared experiences, evolving understanding, it creates anticipation for what comes next. This anticipation is what keeps her thinking about you when you're apart. Many men make the mistake of establishing a pleasant but predictable dynamic with women they're interested in. The conversation topics remain the same, the activities become routine, and the emotional depth plateaus. Without the energy of forward momentum, her mind has little reason to return to thoughts of you when you're not present. The key is consciously guiding your interactions toward greater depth, connection, and discovery over time. This doesn't mean rushing intimacy or forcing vulnerability. It means being attentive to opportunities for meaningful evolution in how you relate to each other. When each interaction builds upon the last, adding new dimensions to your connection, you create a sense of ongoing story that keeps her engaged even in your absence. I experienced this when I was seeing someone long distance. Rather than letting our phone conversations fall into the rut of daily updates, I would often introduce thought-provoking questions or suggest activities we could do simultaneously while on the call. One evening, we both got the same book and read the first chapter together, stopping to discuss our reactions. Another time, we took virtual tours of museums in each other's cities, sharing our perspectives. These experiences created a sense of journey and discovery that kept our connection vibrant despite the physical distance. Let's address something important, the role of physical attraction in being missed. While deep connection and emotional impact are foundational, physical desire plays a significant role in how much a woman thinks about you in your absence. This isn't shallow, it's a fundamental aspect of romantic relationships. The key is understanding that physical attraction is far more psychological than most men realize. Contrary to popular belief, physical attraction for women is heavily influenced by non-physical factors. How you carry yourself, the confidence in your voice, your passion when speaking about what matters to you, the way you move with intention, your ability to maintain eye contact without being intense. These aspects create a physical response in her body that has little to do with conventional attractiveness and everything to do with how you embody your masculine energy. I remember when this reality fully clicked for me. I was at a social gathering where an objectively average-looking man was capturing the attention of several beautiful women. Watching carefully, I noticed his complete comfort in his own skin, the intentional way he moved, his attentive listening, and the passion with which he spoke about his interests. His physical presence communicated a solid sense of self that was magnetically attractive. This brings us to a crucial understanding. Physical chemistry is created primarily through contrast, specifically the contrast between tension and release, between anticipation and fulfillment. Most men rush physical escalation, missing the powerful attraction that builds in the space between moments of contact. When you understand the psychology of anticipation, you can create a physical longing that persists long after you've parted ways. In practice, this might mean maintaining stronger eye contact before looking away, allowing a brief touch to linger slightly longer than expected, or creating moments of physical proximity without immediate escalation. These experiences of partial fulfillment, hinting at deeper connection without completely satisfying it, create the strongest psychological imprints. Her mind naturally returns to these moments of unresolved tension, replaying them and anticipating future connection. I experienced this principle in action when I was dating someone who commented on the effect of our goodbye after dates. "I think about the way you hug me for days afterward," she said. "There's something in how you pull away slowly while maintaining eye contact that stays with me." That small moment of intentional physical presence, nothing overtly sexual or aggressive, had created a lasting impression that kept her thoughts returning to our connection. Now, let's talk about something few men understand: the power of appropriate vulnerability. Many men believe that being missed requires projecting constant strength and having all the answers. But paradoxically, strategic moments of authentic vulnerability create some of the strongest emotional bonds. When you selectively share your real struggles, fears, or uncertainties, not as a plea for reassurance, but as honest self-disclosure, you create intimate connection that a woman will crave in your absence. The key word here is selective. Constant emotional dumping or insecure oversharing creates burden, not connection. But thoughtfully chosen moments of genuine openness create a unique form of intimacy. These moments allow her to see parts of you that aren't visible to the rest of the world, creating a special access that feels both privileged and meaningful. I remember sharing with someone I was dating about my struggle to support a family member through illness, not seeking sympathy, but simply expressing the complex emotions I was navigating. Weeks later, during a period when we hadn't seen each other due to travel, she texted me, "I was thinking about our conversation about your family. I miss being able to talk with you about the real stuff." That moment of authentic vulnerability had created a distinctive connection that she valued and missed in my absence. This brings us to our ninth principle: becoming a source of genuine growth. The most unforgettable people in our lives are those who help us become better versions of ourselves. When your presence in a woman's life consistently inspires her growth, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, or in pursuit of her goals, your absence creates a noticeable void. She misses not just you, but who she becomes when she's with you. This isn't about trying to fix her or assuming you know what's best for her development. It's about bringing out her highest potential through belief, encouragement, perspective, and occasionally the loving challenge we discussed earlier. When you consistently help her see possibilities in herself and her life that she might miss on her own, you become irreplaceable in a way that transcends typical attraction. I experienced this when someone I had dated reached out months after we'd parted ways due to relocating to different cities. "I miss our conversation," she wrote. "No one challenges my thinking the way you do or helps me see situations from perspectives I wouldn't consider on my own." The value I had created wasn't based on validation or entertainment. It was the growth and expansion she experienced through our connection.